Welcome to Access Denied, the tragic story of 15 million children locked outside the schoolhouse door and how we can fix that. My name is Dirk, and I'll be your host. Today, we'll be talking with Chris Lewis, President and CEO of Public Knowledge, a nonprofit whose mission is to promote freedom of expression and open internet and access to affordable communication tools and creative works. They've been holding it down on a national level and fighting for federal solutions to the digital access and equity issues that we are all feeling so sharply now, working to shape policy on behalf of the public interest when so many private interests are working in the background. We'll be discussing the real fixes we can push at the federal level and practical solutions for creating a more equitable and durable internet on-ramp for every family that needs it. This show, Access Denied, chronicles America's digital apartheid, the real-world challenges, the costs and solutions, and how you can help. We've just started, but we have 32,000 plus supporters with Arnie Duncan and Jeb Bush on board, demanding what should be a basic right, internet for all, that every family that needs it should have free, no strings attached broadband, no strings attached. We can do this, but we need you. It's not physics, it's not rocket science, it's a matter of money, will, and creativity. And it's quite a time right now with schools starting across the country, and most of it in distance learning. I know Oakland pretty well. Half of our kids are unconnected or underconnected, and school starts next week, and we haven't distributed devices yet, and we haven't fixed the access issues yet. 95% of California students are starting in distance learning, remote learning, and we aren't remotely close to getting everyone online. Fully 30% of kids never logged online in the first round during that initial shutdown. So school starting, 15 million babies are locked outside the schoolhouse door because they don't have access. This is more than a homework app. This is digital apartheid, with our lowest caste getting the last scraps if they're lucky. Massive disparities in learning loss, disparities in access, and disparities in supplemental support. We've seen all the stories about pods. Well, I think you're going to see a lot of pods in some places and not so many pods other places. And we need to fix this. We need a new digital deal. George Wallace blocked the schoolhouse door and we sent the feds in. Charter Communication and Comcast does effectively the same thing, and the feds may at best send them a polite letter asking them to crack the door open. 15 million kids are locked outside, and we need better. We've seen local solutions. Chicago, in episode 2, we met with their CIO, the community groups that push this. They are promising free, no strings attached, internet now and forever, not just for students, but for low-income families. It's community, it's philanthropy, it's the district, it's the city coming together. And it was philanthropy pushing the city and district to have a sustainable plan, to not just get to the next lily pad, but actually have a way to get to the other shore. And that's what we need. We're going to have short-term solutions right now, but we really need long-term solutions. Chattanooga has solved it. They created their own network. El Paso is using the infrastructure and traffic signals to extend wireless. And Alabama is just going to pay for wireless for low-income kids through December. But it can't be just locals acting. In that case, we're going to see the local places with the most capacity making the most moves, with the most money having the greater access. And the disparities will just play out on cities and states and rural areas. We need federal action. And that's the topic of today's show and how you can be part of that change. So I want to introduce our guest today, Chris, who knows so much more about the federal landscape and can really break down what's going on, how we can fix it, and how you can be a part of that, because it's going to take all of us to make this change. And it starts with the knowledge, and then it moves to action. So Chris, I'd love for you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background, and also please share the work of Public Knowledge.
Yeah, and thank you, Dirk, for having me on the show today. I've been working on technology policy for the last decade, and really was fortunate to have the opportunity coming off of working as an organizer for a year and a half with the Barack Obama campaign in 2007 and 2008. Was presented with an opportunity to do organizing work to connect people to technology. This was the coming digital television transition that happened in 2009, and that introduced me to tech policy, introduced me to the Federal Communications Commission, and I haven't looked back since. It's really been fascinating working in this space, and really seeing that, for the last decade we have failed as a country to live up to the needs of our communities in connecting them. A lot of folks will say, they're realizing now because of COVID about the importance of connectivity. But in that first year in 2009, where I started working at the FCC, I had the pleasure of working with wonderful professionals at that agency to construct what was called the National Broadband Plan. And in that plan, we set goals for connecting every American. We flagged what it would cost. And we flagged the benefits of doing this for folks' education and their health care, their jobs and employment. And for different reasons, in that last decade, we have not seen the political will in Washington to make that plan a reality.
We talked about the cost from Common Sense Media, they had a report that said basically like $7 to $12 billion to connect every unconnected student in the country and give them a device in 1 year. The federal defense budget is $721 billion a year. Boeing's getting $17 billion in the stimulus. Got $17 billion. It's $17 billion in there for Boeing. Tell me a little bit about, there's obviously benefits to this economically for the country, but also for individuals. Like, tell me, why aren't we there? Where did the will go for something that seems like common sense? There was a toilet gap at one point, and we found a way to fix that. Why can't we fix this?
I hadn't heard the toilet gap. You got to tell me about that one later. I think there was a bit of timing with policymaking that was unfortunate. The National Broadband Plan came out about a year after the 2009 stimulus package, the American Recovery Reinvestment Act, and so much money was spent in that there wasn't the political will to spend it on connecting every American once the plan came out. And that's unfortunate because the instruction for Congress to the FCC to create the plan came in that bill, and so you would hope that when they asked for a plan, then they would fund it. So there was some political timing concerns there, and then there's been a real struggle that I hope we can talk about at the federal level around who should have authority over broadband, because it's not just the money that we need to connect all Americans. You mentioned what Common Sense put out in order to connect all students, but I agree with some of this earlier slide that you had where it said it's more than just the homework gap with students. If we connect every household to quality, high-speed, affordable broadband, then students should be taken care of in their homes. I mean, that's what the homework gap is. We've been funding connectivity to schools and libraries for years, but especially our low-income and most vulnerable populations don't have connectivity in the home. And so it takes dollars, certainly. Most folks are estimating about an investment in infrastructure, fiber deployment of around $100 billion. So if we had an infrastructure package that was passed, that would take care of a piece of it. But then the other two pieces of it are really less about dollars and more about policy. Are we going to have an agency in the FCC that has authority over broadband and ensures that it's delivered in an affordable and equitable way to everyone? Because right now there are communities where there is enough density that there's enough money for a broadband provider to make if they deploy it to everyone, but they're picking and choosing neighborhoods that get served or to get upgraded with faster or higher quality broadband. We call this digital redlining, which I think you've also talked about before as well. So there are policy decisions that we need to make to go with the money to make sure that everyone is included and that everyone has the skills and is prepared with the digital literacy to make the best use of that technology.
So that's curious. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the FCC's authority here. We don't have a different set of phones across the country where my phone only works 2 hours a day, or I can only talk it 5 minutes at a time.
Right.
Electricity doesn't run that way. Tell me why isn't broadband treated in the same way that like a telephone is, where I think right now, your very life can depend on having broadband. At one point, you needed to call 911, you needed a phone. If you need to see a doctor, if you need to apply for a job or unemployment, if you need to go to school, you need broadband. And
That's
so,
right.
why is not it treated in that same way? Could you tell us a little bit about that? And I just don't understand.
Sure. Well, we believe, and it sounds like you do as well, that broadband, for all the reasons you named, is the essential communications network of the 21st century, in the same way phones were in the 20th century. During the New Deal, we had this promise of having a phone on every farm. That's how they used to talk about it back then. And unfortunately, we're not hearing that from the government when it comes to broadband. We know it's expensive to deploy to rural areas, and so that's why you need funding and subsidies.
Yeah.
But this other piece about policy has been held up because broadband providers seem to be opposed or nervous about having any sort of rules and regulations around them where they have to answer to a regulatory body, to an agency like the Federal Communications Commission. And that's unfortunate because those policies, those regulations protect consumers. So we're talking about rules like making sure that everyone is connected in a neighborhood or a service area, dealing with digital redlining. We're talking about protections like net neutrality, which is the principle that if you are paying for access to the internet, that you should be able to get to the entire internet and not charge extra like your cable package for one piece of the internet versus another. And these are the sorts of protections and others that go along with it. Subsidy, the subsidy programs for phone and transitioning them to broadband falls under what we call Title II of the Communications Act, and that's where advocates like if I can get real nerdy, have been fighting for Title II broadband protections and net neutrality, affordable access for everyone, disability access for folks in the disability community, privacy over broadband networks, all of that can be protected by the FCC under Title II of the Communications Act. But unfortunately, in 2017, Chairman Pai, the existing chairman of the FCC, and his commission voted 3-2 to remove Title II authority from broadband. And that eliminated net neutrality rules. It eliminated the potential to have privacy rules. It eliminated all of these protections that are important for Americans when they do get broadband deployed to them. So it's been an ongoing fight in Washington. And the sad thing is that it's been, a few large corporate interests holding this up. If you ask the country, and there's polling out there that shows that Democrat, Republican, they see broadband as an essential service. Usually they'll say it's a utility, and they want that sort of Title II protection to ensure that they all have affordable access.
Yeah, I find it amazing because when you look at where the lack of access is, a lot of the red states are actually the most unconnected. And when you think about even just the economy and your ability to really grow economically and not being connected, you're unconnected. I really love that phone on every farm. I had not heard that before. But again, I just think it's like it's the evolution of this is the new world. We don't need a phone on every farm. We need the internet on every household.
That's right.
In every housing project, everywhere, ubiquitously. We're going to dig in on two questions. One question I just want to go first, and then I really want to talk tribes for a second because there are things happening right now that I think folks should know about and get involved in. But who owns the public air? Tell me who we call them the public airwaves. Who owns them? And what are they supposed to be used for?
Right. So when we say the public airwaves, a lot of people think of television, but really it's when you get technical, it's the spectrum, the magnetic spectrum frequencies that we send communications over. So yes, that was radio. Yes, that was television. Now it's wireless broadband. And it is managed by the public because it is a finite resource. Certain wavelengths are more powerful, or actually, I shouldn't say more powerful. They're better suited for certain purposes. And so, while a television signal may work in one spectrum band really well, you can use mobile broadband in multiple spectrums, and it's just what quality of broadband do you want? Do you want it to travel further, or do you want it to penetrate walls? And so managing that spectrum, managing the public airwaves, has been the purview of the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, and how they manage that spectrum in a way that promotes access for everyone, that promotes competition in the marketplace, so consumers have the choice of different mobile providers. So we just saw the merger of Sprint and T-Mobile, a merger we opposed because we didn't want to move from having 4 mobile providers nationwide to having 3, because that reduces consumer choices.
Yeah.
These are all decisions that happen at the FCC. And the FCC's authority over spectrum is important to keep those prices down, to promote competition, and to ensure that we have spectrum available for new innovative services. So things a lot of people like you and I might take for granted, garage door openers, wireless microphones, baby monitors, and now Bluetooth. All of that, runs over your unlicensed spectrum. Same thing with Wi-Fi service, runs over unlicensed spectrum. And that's managed at the FCC. They carve out spaces for unlicensed spectrum. And by unlicensed, literally it means it can't be owned with a license by a Verizon or an AT&T, but it's there for the public to use to experiment and create new inventions that can work over that spectrum. So those are sorts of things we think about with the public airways are important.
And it sounds, who runs the FCC in practice? Like, I know the authority is under Congress, right? But
yes, it was created by Congress.
Yeah.
So we have the Communications Act, or updated in '96 as the Telecommunications Act, and but really Congress through law created the FCC. They have oversight over the FCC, and they have a 5-person commission. The chairman they're appointed by the president, but approved by the Congress, and they're an independent agency once they're appointed. And so, the chairman is usually of the party of the president, because the president gets to select them. But they work as a team with a wonderful professional staff, and I think the world of my old colleagues at the FCC, to try to achieve this mission of making sure that everyone's connected to affordable communications across the country. Congress needs to hold them accountable, though. When they start making decisions that don't protect Americans, we need Congress to step up and either enact laws that force them to hold them accountable. So with net neutrality, there's a bill that's already passed the House, Save the Internet Act, that would restore net neutrality rules and restore Title II protections that we talked about to broadband. But right now, the chairman of the FCC says that broadband should not be regulated at the FCC. And that leaves us with the inability to hold broadband companies accountable, and to make sure that they're doing everything they can to serve every American.
Yeah, that's a challenge I get. It's a public spectrum. It's for public use, and it seems like there's a lot of private profit coming out of it right now, and I don't see a lot of public within what's coming out of the FCC. Let's talk for a second about one of our historically most disenfranchised communities, and some action right now that is going on at the federal government in terms of supporting tribes. The stats up there, 36% of tribal households don't have access. That's only 8% for non-tribal households. So 4 times as many tribal households don't have access to broadband. What can we do about this?
Yeah, this is tremendously important. And the FCC had an opportunity recently to make some headway in this area. You talked about the public airwaves. There's a band of spectrum that is going to go on auction to private companies so that they can build out more broadband. It's the 2.5 gigahertz spectrum band, if you want to get real nerdy. But the good news is that before that goes on auction to the private sector, the FCC had made plans for a window of time where tribal communities, these are sovereign nations within our country, for them to be able to bid on that spectrum in their tribal areas so that they can control connectivity and own the means to build out in their tribal areas. Now, these are often low-income communities, often rural communities, and so it's extremely important that they have this connectivity. Unfortunately, because of COVID, the window landed, or I should say COVID landed right on top of this window where tribes could say, I want spectrum in my area. And that's made it difficult because of COVID for tribes to do the legal work at the FCC. Mm-hmm. And so we've asked for an expansion of time so that tribes have more time. Another 180 days is what we've asked for them to apply for this so that they can control their own destiny in tribal lands. Unfortunately, the FCC just last week, added another 30 days. And there are low-income tribal areas where tribal leaders are saying that is just not enough. So we're hopeful that folks will take action, contact their members of Congress, and ask them that if there is a COVID package here in the next couple weeks, that it include the expansion of that tribal window so our most vulnerable populations can take control of their own access to broadband. This is a bipartisan thing as well. We've heard Republican senators, Republican members of Congress, Democratic senators, members of Congress all weigh in saying that they want to see tribal communities have a fair shake at going after this spectrum before it's auctioned off to the private sector.
Yeah, and again, the Navajo Nation has lost more folks than many states have to COVID, and all this stuff is connected in terms. Connectivity is connected to all these other outcomes ultimately. So we do have a link for folks at the end of the show. We'll share that out in terms of how folks can take action to help support the tribes and in getting sovereignty over their own communications network ultimately, which I think is something that almost everyone should support at this time. So I appreciate you guys, again, just leading on so many of these issues. We've talked about some of these. The pandemic has brought up has brought issues to the fore. I'll say all these issues were already there. It's just brought them to the fore. You mentioned a couple of things we could do. I'd love to just kind of break into them. You talked about changing policies on, I think it was E-rate in particular, around how we can deploy E-rate. Tell us a little about E-rate, how it works right now, and how it could work to actually work.
Right. So E-rate is one of the 4 Universal Service Fund programs. And the Universal Service Fund was created to connect everyone to phones, created under Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. A very popular, successful program. It has 4 parts: the high-cost program for rural areas, subsidies. There's a telemedicine program. There's a lifeline low-income subsidy. And that 4th one, E-rate, is probably one of the most popular because it serves schools and libraries. It's worked great for phones over the years. It's been modified at times so that some of those dollars can go for broadband, but we haven't updated it again because of these fights over authority at the FCC and whether the FCC has authority over broadband. We haven't fully updated all of these universal service programs for the broadband age so that they can offer standalone broadband. And in the COVID crisis, what we've been advocating for is taking the E-rate program that works so well to connect the physical buildings of schools, the physical buildings of libraries, and let school systems use that reimbursement money to extend out service into the community. Because we know in the short term, it costs money to deploy broadband in places where they don't have it. And we could do some extension to cover some people in the short term. It's not going to be a full-time solution, or perhaps it can be used to connect students to devices, MiFi devices that can help. Again, these are short-term Band-Aid solutions that can help with some households that aren't connected. But in the end, we need to have a full overhaul of the Universal Service Program or the subsidies, however you want to structure them, to make sure that you're hitting those points where people are left out, rural communities where it costs to deploy, low-income communities, folks who've been laid off during COVID, but also low-income people in general, so they can afford broadband. And then broadband where they can get broadband, not just have to have a phone or a mobile device, but real broadband in the home. If you got your cell phone, everyone's got their cell phone on them, right? Student can't do their homework on this. You can't write a term paper on this device.
Yeah.
This is why we need broadband into the home, so that students can sit down on a laptop. It has to be of a high quality so that your brother and your sister can work at the same time. Maybe mom and dad is in the other room paying the bills or doing some extra work, teleworking because of the crisis, or because of job opportunities that are now online that allow you to work from home with a job that may be clear across the country. This is the future that broadband offers for everyone if we only do the investments in money and in policy to make sure that everyone can live that household dream of high quality, high speed broadband.
Yeah, and that's the thing to me. This is completely doable. This is not. It's really not sending someone to Mars and back.
No.
It's laying cable. It's getting hotspots in kids' hands. It's getting devices in them, and it's being creative about that. And again, it's being willing to put the money in and putting money in to do it everywhere. Like before there was interstate highways, there were a lot of places that were unconnected. The nation's productivity, as well as its ability to do anything as a nation, was compromised. We're in that same situation on the information superhighway.
And I tell you, folks are frustrated that it hasn't happened. I mean, we're DC, we're Washington based because we work to lobby on behalf of consumers at the Congress. But we have done events. We did an event in shout out to Marietta, Ohio. It's right on the border. West Virginia, Ohio, Appalachia, rural community. Folks came from all over counties in West Virginia and Ohio and Kentucky to our event there. And that's what we heard, that they were just frustrated that their representatives weren't doing enough to make this a reality. You know, you talk about giving a MiFi device to a student, which is great. Folks in West Virginia say, well, maybe that's great, but at my house, I can't even get quality wireless reception here, so I still got to take my MiFi down the road to the McDonald's so my kid can do their homework. So this is why the full solution is deploying full broadband, fiber to the home, so that we can make sure everyone has equal access.
But I thought there was a Keep America Connected pledge already.
Yes.
Was making sure that everyone was connected, no one was going to get shut off. There was going to be free internet for folks that needed it. Now, I thought that we had a pledge that the FCC was the party to.
No, we did get a pledge, but it's voluntary and it's limited. It's time limited. If folks heard about this, the Keep America Connected pledge, because the FCC right now says that they don't have authority over broadband, all they could do was ask. They can make a request of broadband providers because of COVID to try to keep at least their existing customers connected, so that if they're laid off, that they don't cut them off from their connectivity just because they're having trouble paying their bill. And good for the companies for making the pledge that they did in the short term. But now, as the crisis is dragged on, the economic crisis and the COVID crisis, the healthcare crisis is dragged on, this is going to continue. We're already hearing broadband providers, especially in smaller communities where it may not be a big provider like Comcast or Verizon. These smaller providers are saying they're getting squeezed because they're not seeing revenue come in because of people being laid off. And so, we need to see the HEROES Act pass. It was passed in the House. There's this holdup. We need to see these subsidies passed in the Senate that right now would provide what we're calling for is a $50 subsidy to everyone who a broadband provider connects and keeps connected. $50 every month. We hear that'll do the job so that the broadband providers have revenue coming in and they can keep providing service. And folks who are economically distressed from COVID have the funding they need in order to stay connected. It's critically important if folks are going to have access to broadband to do their jobs, for their kids to be connected to school, for folks to get emergency information about what's going on with the pandemic. All of that information travels over broadband in the States.
Yeah. Like, again, most of us, we get a little annoyed when our stuff freezes up or there's like these little tiny things. Can you imagine just having nothing?
There are people,
nothing.
There are people who do.
Yeah. Like, again, that is just, if you really put yourself in that place, that must be almost a terrifying place to be right now, and so insecure and uncertain.
And the good news is that the HEROES Act, enshrines a lot of these voluntary protections from the Keep America Pledge Act, Keep America Connected Pledge, and enshrines a lot of them into law if only the Senate would pass it as a part of the COVID package.
Okay. Yeah. We're going to play a piece in a second, just a complaint that someone sent to the FCC. But when I listen, it sounds like the FCC works for the cable companies right now more so than it's working for the average American. Like I think anyone who's listening to this would say, why is it this way? Outside of there's a set of influences that are influencing the process. Those guys are getting rich through this process. And even when they hook up, if they do hook up these millions of kids, they'll still have internet contracts on them. E-rate or something will be paying for it. So I don't know. They're an essential part of the play right now because they are the infrastructure. We need, as I know you believe, like we need someone to control them. They sound like they're running the process to me, and we're asking them to cooperate.
You're bolder than me, Dirk. You said control them. I just want oversight.
Yeah.
I know they got a business to run. It's a business and a service that we think everybody wants.
Yeah.
But we need a little oversight to make sure that they're doing it in an equitable way because it's that important to communities. I'll settle for oversight before control.
So let's hear about the Keep America Connected pledge from an actual, a voice actor for an actual American. Can we play that?
So I read that this network was not going to shut my service off while we dealing with coronavirus. They done turned mine off twice. This second time today. I got kids and we have barely got food. Please help.
You know, there's thousands of complaints to the FCC. Is the FCC helping?
Not really. You know, they've done the pledge. Companies don't have to hold to the pledge. Some are saying that they're not going to be able to much longer. And so I don't know where that gentleman lives, but depending on where you live, you may have a provider in your community that is simply squeezed too hard because of the economics of the COVID pandemic. And so this is why we need this $50 a month subsidy while we make it through, and to bridge the gap to when we get to a point where Congress can look at a real infrastructure bill and invest real dollars in fiber deployment. But yeah, there's no requirements. There's no teeth that at the FCC that requires that this pledge is maintained. And the pledge, really only goes so far as well. There's a lot of protections that we've fought for years that while it may keep some people connected, it doesn't connect everyone. It doesn't end digital redlining. The pledge doesn't enforce any competitive practices from cable and broadband providers that are preferencing their own content. This is why we had net neutrality rules, and since that rollback, yes, the pledge asks for companies not to impose data limits on people, and some companies are, some aren't. But this is a way that customers get locked into gatekeeper broadband providers because they only have one choice. Or if they're lucky, some communities have two choices for high-speed broadband. I live in a pretty urban area, city of Alexandria, right across the river from Washington, D.C. We have one choice for high-speed broadband here in Alexandria, Virginia. And so whatever Comcast is offering here in Alexandria, our provider, that's what I got to pay for at the price that they say, and with the data limits and restrictions that they put on. That's not a free and open internet.
It's not.
When I say free and open, people, on the broadband companies say, oh, you want to give broadband away for free. I know broadband costs money. We just want it to be free in the sense that folks can go to whatever website they want to, and to be able to afford open access to all of the internet.
Yeah. And it's, to me, our push is it's got to be free for families that can't afford it. Like, they threw a young lady in detention because she didn't log on to do her homework. And it's compulsory to go to school. Like, if you don't, it's truancy if you miss school. Like, technically, a third of the kids who did not log in are truant under the law. And your parent can be punished for that. Not to mention the punishment that your future has by not being able to engage. It's compulsory to go to school, and yet you can't get to school.
Yes.
And so I get that folks need to get paid. Like the provider should be paid. Like you said, there should be competitiveness around that or some price structuring. And I'd be happy to pay more
Mhm.
on my cable bill so that kids could get online. I think most people would be happy to pay more on their cable bill so that kids could get online.
It's
And
funny you say that.
our
We
society
do we
better.
do pay more.
Yeah, there you go. We do pay more.
Here, okay, let's get real nerdy for a second. You look at your cable bill, you look at your broadband bill, you look at your phone bill. You're going to see fees that were not advertised to you when you bought it. We call these below the line fees, and they're for different things. You know, if you're paying for cable TV, it's probably you're going to see a broadcast fee that keeps going up and keeps going up. That's to pay for the retransmission consent agreements with certain broadcasters. But you also see other fees that are hiking up the cost for consumers on their broadband service. So modem fees, you know, they charge you rent on your modem every month.
Yeah.
You know, if you were allowed to buy that modem without having to rent it every month, the amount you pay in probably 3 or 4 months would probably cover the cost of your modem, and you'd have it for however long it works, years and years. So it's hiking up the costs on consumers, but there's no agency investigating that because the FCC doesn't have authority over broadband. You talk about the lack of choices that they have. There's so much work that needs to be done to have oversight over broadband, and people are disappointed when they don't see the government stepping up to protect them in these ways, because it is essential that student, you know, that where they get called truant, or that family that needs to connect for their job. This is important to everyone's daily lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, your internet goes out per hour and you're gonna go ballistic right now. And there's folks who don't have anything. So I'd like to talk a little bit like, what do we do? Like one question is just the FCC related kind of nerdy. So it's 3-2 right now at loss. Like how do people cycle out of the FCC? Can we recall them if they're doing a horrible job and disturbing our families in any way? How does that change? Will that change in an election? Is it a term? When are we going to see one of these people, one of that 3 go?
Yeah, no, elections do matter. You know, the president nominates and appoints FCC commissioners, and the party balance at the FCC under the law is required to have minority members of the party that not of the president. And so who's elected president matters on who you have at the FCC. And we saw that the swing from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. We're a nonpartisan organization, public knowledge, but the policies change. I mean, just speaking the truth. The policies changed. We lost net neutrality. We lost protections under Title II, things that were making sure that people had affordable access. And so elections do matter. Congressional elections matter too. And I think people overlook that when it comes to the FCC. Because even if there's an administration like right now that I may disagree with how Chairman Pai is running the FCC on different issues, most issues we disagree on, at least you can have oversight at the congressional level that holds them accountable, that passes laws. If the FCC won't do it, that forces the FCC to do it, because the FCC ultimately answers to Congress. And so we need senators and congressmen that realize that people are struggling and they don't have the connectivity that they need, and that they're going to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. So let's dig in right now on what can we do right now? Like, this is what y'all do 24/7.
Every day, man.
So tell us, folks who are going to listen, folks who are going to read about it, how can we make this work for families that need it?
Yeah, well, in the short term, there's definitely 2 major things that we're asking for the Congress to do now. You mentioned the tribal campaign. I hope folks check out our campaign. They can contact their members of Congress through our website, publicknowledge.org/connect tribes. Don't forget, 2 T's, connect tribes, is the campaign that's going, and we're working in partnership with tribal stakeholders to push Congress to pass an extension of that window so our most vulnerable populations in tribal areas can get better connectivity. But then we're also asking for the passage of the provisions in the HEROES Act. And I know the HEROES Act was huge, lots of things in it, economically and health-wise. But understated is the $50 a month broadband subsidy during the COVID pandemic. While this pandemic is going on, we need people to be able to afford their connectivity so they can continue to have their kids educated, have access to healthcare over telemedicine. And for the broadband providers, by the way, I probably, it sounds like I talked a lot of smack about broadband providers. Broadband providers are on our side on this COVID package. They want the $50 subsidy too. I've seen proposals from Comcast. I've seen proposals from Charter. I've seen proposals from Verizon and T-Mobile. They want it too because they know that their bottom line says they need that revenue coming in to keep you connected, to keep me connected. So we need Congress to act on this right away. In the short term, that's what we need. And if we get that right now in the next few weeks, the next month, then we can talk about a new administration and electing people to Congress and the presidency. They're going to do the long-term investment of policy, the long-term investment of dollars to connect everyone.
And folks, you can see the links that we had up there around this work. As Chris said, I think one of the things that folks need to do is really your local congressperson really matters on this stuff. And I think I think most folks view this as quite logical, even on both sides of the aisle. But we need to push. There's a lot happening, so it really depends on us to push folks to put this at the top of their list amidst all the things on the list.
And Dirk, I'll be real. I'll be specific. The House passed what they needed to pass. We need the Senate to act. So most important is contact your senator. Democratic and Republican senators are telling Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, the leaders right now, what they want to see in this package. We need every member of the Senate to tell Leader Schumer and Leader McConnell that they want broadband in this package.
The tribal stuff, please do that. Again, if there's someone or a community we owe as a nation, it's certainly the tribes. And so we should really act to make sure that they do have sovereignty over their own communications network. I like this.
See, Gordon looked at his bill. I'm sorry to ruin your day, Gordon, but you looked at your bill. You saw that modem fee. Yeah,
because it's funny. You'll get this $99 deal, and then you end up with $136 or something a month, and you're like, how did 99 turn to $137? And again, it's like these things like that, like a modem fee. It's just these like ticky-tacky things that just kind of jerk you around over the course of your life and suck the money out of you. But again, we should pay for this stuff. We should just pay for it straight up. But a modem fee is not straight up to me. So Chris, any final thoughts? We're getting ready to wrap up right now. What would you tell folks to do? What's the possibility we have? Where can we go? Give us something inspirational and tell us your final thoughts on this stuff.
Well, what inspires me is that, I work for a 20-person organization here in public knowledge, and we're up against hundreds of lobbyists from the cable and the broadband industry every day. They give campaign contributions. We don't do that. We're a little nonprofit. But where we are successful is when people realize that what they're going through in their community, other people are going through as well, and that they all speak up. Urban, rural, it doesn't matter. Democrat, Republican, people are united on this need to be connected to broadband and that it's essential to their lives. And so that's what gives me hope, that the people outside of Washington know this is important. We just need them to speak up. And so, people power, government of and for the people, that's what gives me hope. And I just hope folks will take advantage of either our tools to contact Congress or contact on your own to make this happen.
I really appreciate you, Chris, and the work that you all do. We need an advocate for the public interests with all these circling private interests there. And again, the loss of kids, the 15 million children that are unconnected, is something that we just need to fix, and it's completely doable. So I really want to thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Folks, please follow Chris and the work of Public Knowledge. Sign and share our petition. Reach out to your reps. Look at the tribal stuff we have up there, and please interact on that. Stand up for folks who sometimes have not had other folks standing up for them. Hold your local city and state accountable around Internet for All. We need you to make this a reality. That's the message from Chris today, is there's a lot of interest circling, and there's a lot of costs that we're feeling, and we need to be involved in this fight. We need to make our voices heard and make our priorities go to the top of the list. You can do that. We can do that together. So thanks, Chris, for joining us. Next week, we're going to talk rural. So we'll have folks from Kentucky talking about the rural gaps there and some of the action happening there. But we need federal action. That's the thing I would say that coming out of this. We'll have local solutions that may look a little bit different, but we need federal action in terms of putting money into it and changing the rules of the game to make sure that everybody's protected and connected. So I really appreciate you, Chris, and the work you're doing. Thank you. Thank everybody who joined us today. We'll follow up with some ways y'all can help. And really, let's make this a reality. 15 million kids need us.